They formed a network, and it appeared to be planned, not accidental. Using advanced radar imaging and digital reconstruction, the team was able to map the structure's major sections. What emerged was a central hallway beginning beneath the Qorikancha temple. From there, 3 large paths extended in different directions. These paths weren't random. Each one was aimed at a historically significant Inca site. The first tunnel headed northwest and pointed directly at Sican, the massive fortress on the hill above Cusco. The second led west toward the area of Calispucio, where several ritual water channels had been discovered in the past. The third tunnel curved north-northeast in the direction of the Church of San Cristobal and the ruins of Muyuk Mara, a circular stone structure with unclear function. Each branch was estimated to be at least 1 mile in length. All appeared to maintain a consistent width of about 8.5 feet, with an average ceiling height of roughly 5 feet. That meant these weren't just crawl spaces or emergency exits. They were large enough for groups of people to walk through upright. The depth varied depending on location, but generally stayed within a range of 5 to 8 feet below the surface, far enough to avoid detection for centuries, but close enough to leave traces that modern equipment could identify. The geometry of the system raised even more questions. The tunnels followed unusually straight lines for long stretches. Where they turned, they did so at planned angles. In several cases, the turns appeared to follow land changes in the landscape, suggesting the builders had precise knowledge of the terrain. What really caught the attention of some experts was the building style, though no digging had been done. Yet, the radar imaging showed outlines suggesting trapezoidal shapes common in Inca doorways and foundations that implied stone reinforcement rather than just carved earth. Based on that, insiders guessed the tunnels were not only large, but may have been designed to last, possibly using the same earthquake-resistant techniques seen in other Inca buildings. There were also smaller offshoots, narrower paths that branched off the main hallways. These measured closer to 3 feet wide and 4 feet high and extended no more than 100 to 200 feet. No one could confirm their purpose, but some scientists suggested they may have been air shafts, storage areas, or possibly ritual. Ruins dot the smaller paths were mostly clustered near the starting point, under Corona. What wasn't found was just as interesting. There were no signs of vertical shafts leading directly up to the surface. That meant any access points were likely hidden inside buildings or courtyards, not open in public plazas or roads. This aligned with long-standing claims that entrances were intentionally sealed during or after the Spanish conquest. Oral histories even mentioned specific families being ordered to cover access points with stone or fill them with rubble under the threat of punishment. One of the engineers helping the radar analysis, Miguel Sora Valdez, noted that the system's layout mirrored some features of Inca city planning. According to Miguel, the Incas often designed their cities with hidden alignments that reflected star or spiritual principles. While it's too early to say if the maze follows such patterns, its symmetry and direction weren't accidental. Some researchers are calling it an underground echo of Cusco itself. Just as the city above ground was built with precision, the world below may have followed the same rules. Geometry, direction, and spiritual symbolism. At this stage, the system remained sealed. No digging had been done, and no cameras had entered the tunnels, but the radar maps were already drawing attention. Several international institutions began requesting access to the raw data to begin their own analysis. A few offered 3D reconstruction tools to model what the interior might look like once opened. The Inca were known for building massive earthquake-resistant structures out of granite and limestone with no mortar, using stones cut so precisely that a knife blade couldn't fit between them. If the same technique was used underground, then what lay beneath Qorikancha wasn't just a tunnel system. It was a hidden extension of one of the most advanced civilizations in pre-Columbian America. And the deeper the maps went, the more that idea became impossible to ignore. The big reveal. The moment the public found out about the discovery came quietly without a government announcement. Instead, it started with a leak. According to insiders close to the project, an early version of the internal report was shared with a group of outside consultants for checking. Within days, images from the radar scans started making rounds in academic circles and eventually surfaced online. The scans clearly showed a massive man-made tunnel system starting beneath the Qorikancha temple. For decades, scientists and historians had debated whether the legendary chincanas were real. Now, they had physical proof. The data confirmed that a large maze built with intentional design and structure had been hidden under Cusco for hundreds of years. The team behind the discovery didn't intend to make headlines. Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino had hoped to complete a full review before going public, but the story had moved faster than they expected. Once the radar visuals went viral, news outlets started covering it. The narrative quickly shifted from theory to confirmation, and that's when it caught the attention of people far outside the archaeology world. Even Joe Rogan weighed in, saying, "What archaeologists just discovered about the Corona Temple will blow your mind." He reportedly mentioned the story before filming one of his podcasts, calling it one of the most insane things he's ever heard. He pointed out that the Inca weren't just carving stones on mountains. They were building entire systems underground that we're only discovering now. You know how nuts it is that we're still finding stuff like this? This changes everything. Joe said, "It's like they left a second city down there, and we had no clue." It wasn't just the size that shocked people. It was the fact that this information had been sitting beneath one of the most visited landmarks in South America. Every year, thousands of tourists walk through Corona, many unaware of what could be lying just a few feet beneath the stone paths. To have a full-scale tunnel system right under their feet, and for it to go unnoticed for so long seemed impossible. Officials from the Ministry of Culture eventually confirmed the discoveries, though they were careful with their wording. They described the empty spaces as architectural oddities, consistent with pre-Columbian building techniques. But by that time, the evidence had already been reviewed by independent geologists and structural engineers. Their conclusions all pointed to the same thing. This wasn't a natural formation, and it wasn't random. It was planned and built by human hands, specifically Inca hands. Some of the details released in the report stunned even seasoned experts. Layout included long hallways, sudden turns, and consistent proportions. The alignment of the tunnels suggested that the builders knew exactly what they were doing. The shape of the hallways, wide at the base and tapering slightly at the top, matched what is known from other Inca building sites designed to handle earthquake activity. In short, the same engineering precision seen in Inca temples and fortresses appeared underground as well. The timing of the discovery couldn't have been more important. For years, mainstream archaeology had started to reconsider long-dismissed stories about hidden rooms, tunnels, and unknown rooms buried beneath major sites. The confirmed Corona maze became the strongest piece of evidence yet. That many of those rumors weren't just folklore. They were history. This wasn't a partial discovery. It wasn't a few feet of broken stone or a collapsed room. This was a verified continuous maze stretching from one of the most sacred sites in the Inca world. It forced experts to reconsider how the Incas used space, not just above ground, but below it. And it made one thing very clear. Whatever we thought we knew about Qorikancha was incomplete. The most important part of the temple wasn't what stood in plain view. It was what had been hidden on purpose for centuries. Why it matters. Once the existence of the underground maze beneath Corona was confirmed, the attention shifted to a much bigger question. Why did the Inca build it in the first place? There's no simple answer. While the Inca Empire left behind many impressive structures, temples, fortresses, and roads, this maze changes the scale of what was previously understood. Most scientists agree that the Incas were master planners. Their cities were laid out with star alignments. Their walls were built to withstand earthquakes, and their roads stretched across thousands of miles. But the discovery of a carefully built underground network beneath their most sacred site adds a whole new layer to their building philosophy. Some researchers believe the maze had ceremonial functions. Qorikancha wasn't just a temple. It was the spiritual center of the Inca Empire. From that site, priests tracked the sun, conducted important rituals, and maintained the Inca calendar. It's possible the tunnels were part of initiation rites or restricted passages for priests only. The controlled size and directional layout suggest it wasn't designed for mass movement, but rather specific individuals or small groups with defined purposes. Others propose a strategic function. The layout of the tunnels extending from Qorikancha to Sakan and other points mirrors the distribution of important Inca installations. Some insiders suggest the maze might have served as a communication or escape system. In the event of an invasion or uprising, high-ranking individuals could move between key points of the city without being seen. Given the Spanish conquest of Cusco in the 1530s, it's not unreasonable to assume such a system could have been part of the Incas' defensive planning, especially if the tunnels came before that period. One point of interest is the alignment of the tunnels with above-ground features. The hallway that connects Qorikancha to Sacsayhuaman, for example, follows a route that cuts through several known ceremonial sites. According to engineers reviewing the mapping data, the angles and turns appear to correspond with land changes and possibly even solar alignments. This strengthens the theory that the maze wasn't just for movement, but had symbolic or ritual meaning as well. Some experts have pointed out how the underground layout mirrors the structure of Cusco itself. The city was designed in the shape of a puma with Sacsayhuaman as the head. The tunnels beneath could represent a mirrored world, a sacred underworld that runs parallel to the physical one. In Inca belief systems, the world was divided into three planes: Hanan Pacha, or the upper world; Kapcha, the earthly world; and Ukupcha, the inner or underground world. The tunnels could have symbolized access to that third world, the realm of ancestors and hidden forces. Cultural officials are now debating whether the structure should be open for research or preserved as is. Digging would require extreme care, especially given the age and religious importance of the site. There's also growing concern over how much of the structure still remains intact. If colonial or modern construction has damaged parts of the tunnel, it could be too fragile to explore physically. Remote sensing tools and robotic drones are being considered as safer alternatives. Jorge Calo Flores, who helped lead the radar mapping, has emphasized the need for caution. In interviews, Jorge explained that the maze isn't just a discovery. It's a responsibility. We're not just dealing with stones. We're dealing with something the Inca wanted to protect. It could have built it anywhere, but they built it beneath their holiest temple. That means something. Mildred Fernandez Palomino agrees. She's been working with cultural preservation groups to ensure that any future exploration follows strict guidelines. We can't treat this like another archaeological find, Mildred said. It's tied directly to a living culture. The people of Cusco still hold these places sacred. We have to respect that. Interest in the maze has now gone global. Historians, engineers, and even architects are studying the layout to better understand how such a complex structure was built using tools that came before modern engineering. It raises questions about what other Inca sites might be hiding and whether the empire was operating on a level far more advanced than previously accepted. The Qorikancha maze doesn't just rewrite one chapter of history. It forces a rewrite of the entire approach to how Inca civilization is studied. It challenges the assumption that their greatest achievements were visible above ground, and it gives new weight to the idea that Inca knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, and architectural went deeper than we ever imagined. So, what do you think about this finding? Let us know in the comments. Under one of the most holy places in South America, something has been hiding in plain sight. For hundreds of years, rumors went around about what was underneath the legendary Qorikancha temple in Cusco, but no one could prove anything. Local people talked about sealed tunnels, lost rooms, and secret passages going for miles. Most people said it was just made-up stories until now. What scientists recently found didn't just prove the old stories right. It opened the door to something much bigger. Joe Rogan called it one of the wildest discoveries of our time. And once you hear what they found, you'll understand exactly why whispers beneath the temple. The Qorikancha Temple in Cusco has always been surrounded by mystery. Known as the Temple of the Sun, it was the most important religious place in the Inca Empire. Today, most visitors walk through the stone remains without knowing that some of the temple's greatest secrets may still be hidden below their feet. For hundreds of years, there have been stories about something massive lying beneath. Qorikancha, tales of tunnels, rooms, and even a full underground city, all buried and untouched. These stories aren't modern made-up theories. Some of the earliest Spanish record keepers wrote about strange openings in the ground near the temple. Garcilaso de la, a historian of Inca and Spanish family, recorded descriptions of Chinchana's tunnels that supposedly connected Qorikancha to faraway parts of Cusco and even beyond. Jesuit missionaries in the late 1500s mentioned similar passages under the city, claiming some of these tunnels ran for miles. A few even claimed that treasures were hidden down there during the Spanish takeover and never found. Local people in Cusco have passed down stories about these underground paths for generations. Some speak of people who went into the Chinas and never came back. Others remember times when parts of the city cracked open unexpectedly, showing hollow rooms beneath. But for a long time, nobody could prove anything. The church and colonial buildings built on top of Qorikancha made large-scale digging impossible. Every time someone suggested looking into the rumors, they ran into blocked access, government rules, or worries about damaging historical buildings. Despite that, the whispers never stopped. Some scientists said the tunnel legends were exaggerated. Others believed the Inca may have used small crawl spaces or hidden storage rooms, but doubted anything more complex existed. Even so, researchers continued to hear the same details repeated over and over, that a large tunnel started somewhere beneath Corona, stretched to the fortress of Sacsayhuamán, nearly a mile away, and branched out to different points around the city. Some modern researchers, based on interviews with local families, believe the entrances may have been sealed off during colonial times to keep the Spanish from stealing Inca gold. These claims aren't confirmed, but they match accounts in both Spanish records and oral traditions. There are also reports from the 20th century of explorers or workers falling into underground empty spaces, only for those locations to be sealed again without follow-up. These scattered incidents fueled decades of guessing. But for most of the 20th century, archaeology lacked the tools to prove or disprove the stories without digging directly. And with Qorikancha protected as a heritage site, physical digging was limited. In recent years, however, that changed. Technology finally gave scientists the ability to scan under the surface without disturbing anything above. That was the turning point. What was once just folklore was finally brought back into the spotlight. And this time, researchers had more than stories to go on. Even before any big announcements were made, the possibility of finding something beneath Corona caught attention online. people began wondering if the ancient legends were true. Some started to connect it to other global discoveries of hidden tunnels beneath major temples. Joe Rogan even joked in a recent podcast episode that if the Incas did build a massive underground tunnel system under the city, we'd barely scratched the surface of what they were capable of. At this point in the story, no one had confirmed anything. But signs were pointing towards something being down there, something big, and possibly something that was meant to stay hidden. It was only a matter of time before someone figured out a way to check. And when they finally did, what they found shocked even the most doubtful experts. Modern science joins the hunt. The real breakthrough came when scientists finally turned to modern technology. For decades, local legends and old manuscripts hinted at tunnels under Cusco, but there was no practical way to test the claims without risking damage to cultural landmarks. That changed when researchers began using non-damaging methods like ground-penetrating radar and sound surveys. These tools allowed them to map what was beneath the surface without digging a single inch. Leading the effort was Jorge Calero Flores, a respected Peruvian scientist who had spent years studying Inca building methods. Working alongside him was Mildred Fernandez Palomino, a ground science specialist with experience in underground mapping. Their team received approval to do scans under specific sections of Corona and its surrounding areas. The goal wasn't to prove any one theory right. They simply wanted to record what, if anything, was under the site using current science. The radar results came back with something unexpected. Beneath the foundation of Qorikancha, the scans showed long, continuous empty spaces, hollow areas that didn't match the natural rock layers. These empty spaces appeared to be straight at the same depths and were wide enough to suggest intentional design. In some places, they were about 8.5 feet wide and 5 feet high, large enough for an adult to walk upright through. These weren't random gaps in the rock. They were on purpose. To double-check the findings, the team did a sound test. This method uses sound waves to measure density differences below the surface. When they did it over the same areas, they got the same result. Man-made hollow zones, stretching over long distances. The data was clear. Something had been built beneath the temple. The structures were deep, between 4.5 and 8 feet underground, and they extended farther than anyone expected. In one section, the empty spaces seemed to connect Corona to a point nearly a mile away. But what really surprised the team was that the radar picked up signs of multiple branches, not just a single tunnel. One branch ran toward the Church of San Cristobal. Another curved toward Calispicchio. A third aimed toward the circular tower structure of Muyuk Mara. At that point, no one could say for certain what these empty spaces were used for, but the layout matched old maps and colonial reports that described secret passages between key locations in Cusco, according to insiders who reviewed the early scan results. Some officials were hesitant to make the discovery public right away. The implications were too big. Confirming an ancient underground system beneath some of the most protected historical landmarks in Peru could trigger controversy, especially if further investigation led to large-scale digging. But the science left little room for doubt. The structures were real. They weren't sinkholes, and they weren't natural crack lines. The dimensions were too precise, and the direction too organized. Jorge and Mildred agreed that the only explanation was a man-made system. They chose to present their findings first to Peru's Ministry of Culture before sharing them with the public. Ministry began to review the data internally and consider next steps. Even limited digging would require permits, engineering studies, and historical impact assessments. Meanwhile, word of the discovery began to spread among academic circles. Some researchers from international universities requested access to the radar data, A few even proposed 3D modeling projects to virtually rebuild the tunnel paths using the scan results. By the time the general public found out, the evidence was already being checked by multiple teams. This wasn't just another theory. It was real data from real scans. The only thing left was to see how far it actually went. Mapping the maze. Once the presence of underground empty spaces was confirmed, the next step was to understand their shape, size, and direction. The term maze started going around among the team, not in the mythical sense, but as a practical description of what was slowly being revealed. The structures didn't form a straight tunnel from one point to another.